Ladies and gentlemen, it's Weather Brains, episode 699, getting close to 700 for the 10th of June, 2019. This is the pre-show, the magical time of the show where we share bold personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say very outrageous things. We know you're not watching the NBA playoffs tonight. You're watching Weather Brains. Come on. This is real entertainment right here. So if you've not seen this before, the real show begins in about 12 minutes. So if you want to cut through the foolishness, just move the slider over. Most people listen to this show on the podcast side. It's an audio produced show, but a few of you have the courage to watch, and we thank you for doing that. And part of the reason we moved to video, I guess about, 7 years ago, was to simulcast this on cable television outlets in my part of the world, at the request of my boss. And when the boss makes a request, you do it. So that's when we kind of converted to the video side here. But it's been fun. We've always had challenges getting people on the video. But hey, Kim, welcome back. How are you?
Doing well tonight, James. How are you doing?
I'm good. Feel good. It's this is a time where things slow down a smidgen for me. In fact, next week, I will be taking the first vacation week of the year. So
Wow.
what we're going to do is we're going to record next week's show Thursday night of this week to have that all ready to go. And when I take off to the middle part of June, we make a trip to a random baseball park. We're trying to see all the major league parks. And this year we're going to Detroit, Michigan.
Ooh, Detroit. Fun. Have you been to that ballpark before?
No, we have not. So our friend Terry Francona, he's the manager of the Cleveland Indians. They'll be in town this coming weekend. So we hope to see him. And hopefully it's not going to rain us out. It's always iffy in Detroit in June, but that's okay. But if it rains it out, we'll just stay another day or something. We're floating. We're floaters up there. So, but anyway, I have been to the airport in Detroit multiple times, but I have never been in the city of Detroit. So, looking forward to visiting our friends there. And what's funny on these random baseball trips? Inevitably, there's always a few Weather Brains listeners that catch up with me. So if you want to do a meetup, at the Comerica Park in Detroit, Saturday or Sunday, just send me a direct message on the Twitter, Instagram, and I answer everything, and we'll make that happen. We've taken some fun pictures and had some fun laughs and met some really remarkable people. I met some in Denver last year. Last year's trip was to Coors Field. 1 year, I met several WeatherBrains fans at St. Louis at the stadium there. But it's always fun to see people all over. So, Kim, are you coming to Huntsville, Alabama for the NWA meeting later this year?
I'm hoping to. I'm still trying to decide. Having the little one makes travel just a little bit more complicated than it used to be. But I'm really hoping that I can. Are you going to be there?
Yes. So, yeah, it's in our backyard. So I think I've committed to do like 5 different things. I hope I can honor all these commitments. I just got a note from a local weather service person wanting me to participate in let's me pull up that note, a panel discussion Sunday afternoon. And they accepted my little abstract. So I'm going to do an oral on that. I think I'm doing that on Sunday. But no, that'll be fun. Huntsville is a very interesting city. For those that have never been, it's a very high-tech city. A lot of the employees work for the Marshall Space Flight Center or big software engineering firms, very high-tech type market. It's a very interesting place. There's a fairly large weather business there, Barron Services. They are in the business of providing graphic systems to television stations. They sell radar systems and have some consumer products as well. So anyway, I think it'll be a whole lot of fun. But I understand the travel. Look, we raised 2 kids 13 years apart, and to go to all the ball games and to all of the events and not to miss anything. let me tell you what, I missed a lot of weather conferences, and I look back and I don't really have any regrets. I don't, but there was a long stretch where getting to a weather conference was very challenging. So I can understand your position. But when we became empty nesters, weather conferences got a lot easier. So,
yeah, well, a difference of 13 years. You just sort of had rolling commitments. You'd get through one season with one child just to have it all start over again with the next one.
We put the oldest one in his college dorm room for his first day, and then 2 days later, the youngest one started his first day of kindergarten. So, it just kind of prolonged the whole thing for a long time. But again, I have absolutely no regrets. I look back on it. I think that it really needed to work out that way to be in order to get to all of these events. And you can't go to all of them. Come on, I work nights at a TV station. It's hard. But all right, so let me see if I can. I'm going to email our guest with this magical link we have here, because I've done the standard invite, and often we know that doesn't work. So let's do this. Send an email message.
And I'll let her know that you have sent the invite.
The email message has been sent that way. So she's got it the standard way via Hangouts, and also John cannot find the link either. Wow. We're just struggling here with this stuff. All right. Let me reply to John so he can get on with us. All right. So he has been invited. And the email address just bounced that you gave me in the chat.
Okay.
Kim.
Let me double check it.
Okay.
I had
money.
Oh, yeah, sorry, there's a typo.
That's okay.
We will
make it happen. All right. So let's try that. Okay. So she has now been invited by email. I bet you I've gotten 100 sunset pictures tonight. I don't know why people send me these. I've got them from all over creation. They're gorgeous, just stunning. But somehow I become on my tombstone, it's going to say tweeter of sunsets.
Hey, you get some marvelous sunset pictures. All right, you're on. Hey, Shanna, can you hear us?
Shanna, can you hear us?
Oh, no. We tested her sound earlier and it was good. Oh, here we go. Can you hear us?
We can hear you. I don't think you can hear us. There's a little. I would try and talk our way through it, but if she can't hear us, that's not good.
Should we have her try to turn it off and on again?
I don't know, but I can play.
If you try turning it off and on again, off and on again, off and on again.
John, let's see if you got that helium thing going.
Yeah, here's my helium check, James. 1, 2, 3.
Oh man, no helium this week. You're loud and clear.
I've moved to hydrogen.
That's right. We have a helium shortage. I think most of the balloons are being filled up with hydrogen now, aren't they?
I think they are. It's not completely hydrogen, but yeah, I think they're moving from helium. Too expensive.
Yeah, no, it's expensive, and there's a shortage. And the only problem with hydrogen, it's a little flammable. You have to be kind of careful with it. But
well,
I've heard of no explosions in the inflation buildings.
A little problem if you want to use that as a fuel for a rocket. That's correct. You got to be very careful.
Yeah. So let's see. Shanna, can you hear us?
I can most certainly hear you now.
Okay.
Yay!
Now give us a little countdown. Let's hear you talk, so be sure your audio is good.
Okay, well, I am Shanna. I'll even sing for you if that helps.
Well, go. We don't get entertained on this show. We don't have any performance here.
Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Got it?
I think we're good.
Excellent.
So let me send one to Troy.
Is he also having trouble?
Yeah, it's just very strange. Some of the some nights it works, some nights it doesn't work. It's just it doesn't make any sense.
True.
But it is what it is. We are slaves to the platform here. In order to do the video, we pretty much have to use this platform. It's actually very nice, although I keep hearing it's going to go away. And this is going to be just a part of the Google Enterprise suite and not available to Joe Q public like us. But we'll come up with something. We'll make it work. But the nice thing about this, if you get really busy, you don't have to even switch it. It's all done manually or automatically based on the audio. Whoever's talking, the video comes up full screen. Now, I can switch it manually if I have to, but it kind of flies on its own, which is awfully nice. So we have to wait another 30 seconds, and we're going to hit the television here at the bottom of the hour, and then we can get started. I think Aubrey is on vacation in Montana. I saw her photo from a community up there where snow was falling over the weekend, which was kind of fun. And Bill is at the it's 50-cent beer night down at Hooters, so Bill's not with us tonight. And Nate is flying to the AMS broadcaster meeting. I want to say it's in San Diego this year.
Yes, it is. And
so
Nate says, hi, Shanna.
Oh, please send hello back right for me.
Yeah, Nate is he would be here, Shanna, but he is in the air on the way to California. And we haven't seen ever since the weather got active out there. Kevin's dug a hole or something. I don't know what's happened to Kevin. We have to go find him. Troy, have you seen Kevin here lately?
Nah, I didn't see him in Austin anytime today. So
haven't seen him in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. And by the way, let me welcome our television viewers. Thank you for watching. This is WeatherBrains. We're about to kick off the show. It's 30 minutes after the hour, so you know what this is. It's Monday night, and it's WeatherBrains. And let me just say, too, for the television viewers, we are going to record next week's show, but on the television side, you'll see it Monday. We're going to produce it Thursday, but it will be on television at the regular time next Monday at 8:30. So let's get started here. Here we go. And by the way, I'm very sad. We had some sad news this week. I'll do it during the show. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's WeatherBrains episode number 699. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is for the 10th of June, 2019. And let me just start with some sad song here. I'm going to play this. Hang on, wait a minute. I botched this is why I'm not a good button presser guy. I have never taken a class in radio or TV or any of this stuff. I just do it. Yeah, it really does show. Trust me. So let me play a little bit. I can't play much of this because we'll get in trouble. Let me see if anybody knows this song. So, often when Dr. John gets on, we play that song. It's called Right Place, Wrong Time by Dr. John. He passed away a few days ago. He was a legendary performer based in New Orleans, and he had a very unique sound, and that was his biggest commercial hit. But Dr. John, and the reason we can't play the whole song, we got in trouble. I get this. I played almost the whole song when we get this nasty letter from YouTube, threatening to, cut my right arm off and take away my computer, and so we can't play those songs here. But anyway, Dr. John, welcome back. I guess the weather's settled down up there, huh?
Well, a little bit. Yeah, it's quite a rainy day here today. A highly amplified flow. I mean, we've yet to really get into a typical pattern for early June, if there is a typical pattern, but we're going to have a reprieve tomorrow and Wednesday, and then guess what? Another trough swings through and more rain. So if you don't like the weather, hang in there. It'll change.
At least you're not dealing with severe thunderstorms and tornadoes and stuff.
No, I have to tell you a story about that one. That May the 29th was that outbreak up here in Pennsylvania. There was, 4 or 5 confirmed tornadoes, and there was a guy who would not leave the Weather Service alone in a county north of where I'm located. And so he kept badgering them, got actually some of the municipal people involved. So the Weather Service called me and said, would you mind going up there and settling this deal once and for all? So this guy had taken a picture of what looked like a funnel cloud. I think in reality what it was just an outflow boundary that looked milky white. So I went up there, did a damage survey, settled everybody's interests. And interestingly enough, there was a church steeple that was knocked off a church found in the parking lot. So I went and took a look at it, and it had 6 1-inch pins that were holding it to the roof of the church. And when the wind came through, it just pulled it off the roof, bolts and all, nuts and bolts, all there, sitting right in the parking lot. So I guess they didn't expect to get any wind out of this when they put it on the roof.
Right? How long did it live? How long did it survive on that roof?
That's a really good question. I don't know, but there were other buildings right nearby without even shingle damage. So suffice it to say, we came up with a straight line wind, 75 to 85 miles per hour, where most of the damage was. I wrote up a report, sent it to the Weather Service, and we can move on.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And by the way, Dr. John had a very touching service for Bart Starr down here this weekend at Samford University. And for those that don't know, John is a big Green Bay Packers fan. And in fact, if you look carefully on his wall, if you're watching,
right there,
that is a photograph of Bart Starr. It looks like it's an autograph photograph.
It is an autograph picture from Bart Starr, yes.
And I see his wife. I see his wife, Cherry, fairly often, but I could tell over the last several years his health has really deteriorated, and it took a toll on her, but yet she was strong and stayed with him and took care of him. And I just think it was his time. But it was a very touching service. The NFL commissioner was here, and he affected so many people in a very positive way throughout his entire life, really all the way through college and his playing days for the Packers and later in life. So I hated to hear the news of his passing, but it was clearly his time. His quality of life was not that good. So we can certainly celebrate a life well lived. And for a kid coming out of Montgomery, Alabama, he did good. He really did. All right, Troy. So, man, Dallas, they took a blow yesterday afternoon, didn't they?
Well, down here, they did. There's going to be probably some big lawsuits with a crane company before it's all over and done with. One fatality up there in an apartment complex.
Really?
There's some video out there, guys, that it's on YouTube somewhere. I saw a little bit of it. Someone was looking at the skyline of Dallas, and they apparently had let the cranes run a little bit loose. Expecting the high winds, and these things started spinning at a distance looking at them, and then one just fell and smashed through about 2 or 3 stories in an apartment complex, a metropolitan high-rise apartment complex, and one young lady was killed. So you're going to see lawsuits up there. Now down here, we had pretty close to us. This actually is in Fort Worth's area of responsibility, county warning area, up at Copper's Cove, Texas. Several hundred homes damaged by what they have given as an EF2 tornado now, that according to the Weather Service in Fort Worth. No injuries with that. Here in Austin last night, thunderstorms, mainly with straight line winds and some hail, ended up with upwards of about 66 mile per hour winds at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. We heard of some 80 mile per hour unconfirmed winds over near Manor, which is east of Austin, and several of those service station canopies were damaged, also down in Lockhart. So very busy day last night, but today has been a beautiful day. We had a cold front pass and went from the 90s yesterday back to the mid and upper 80s today.
Yeah, we're excited. We have a June cold front here. We're going to see lower humidity tomorrow. But let's stop talking about weather and bring in our guest. Kim, let's introduce our guest.
All right, great. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Shanna Pitter. Shanna, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
And this is going to be a really fun, kind of different show. We're going to talk a little bit about an organization that some folks may have heard of, some might not have, the World Meteorological Organization, or WMO. And this is an organization that Shanna gets to work with under the Director for the National Weather Service, Dr. Uccellini, and she'll describe some of that work and how it all works, how it functions. We'll talk a little bit, too, about Dr. Uccellini is actually running for president of this organization. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the show. But first, Shanna, let's get to know you a little bit before we find out how it is you got to work in such an interesting area, working in international sorts of slices of how weather and climate data work. Tell us a little bit about how you got interested in the atmosphere.
Sure. So I'm actually from Jamaica. I was born and raised, and it so happened that September 12, 1988, a very famous hurricane came passing through. Does anyone know which one that was?
Was it George?
Gilbert.
The G. I had the right letter.
At the time, lowest central pressure. It was really horrible. It was Category 4 when it went through, and I was this young, 7 or 8 years old kid that was just completely in awe of what was going on. I mean, my favorite mango tree came tumbling down, or coconut tree went from one direction to the other. By the time the storm passed through, I remember even going outside for the eye and expecting to see a gigantic thing looking at me, I didn't know what to expect. So yeah, it was fascinating, and I just wanted to know more. So yeah, I've been interested in hurricanes, and over time, as I moved to the United States and got into colleges, I was introduced into into remote sensing, satellites, and then I also got an internship at the Hurricane Research Division. So I did manage to get into a hurricane, flying in their reconnaissance flight. But it took until I was 30 before that happened. But yeah, for this position, I had a chance to fly with Jack Hayes at the time into Hurricane Irene. That time I was 30, and it so happens that he was the U.S. permanent representative to the WMO. And he says, we actually send people to the WMO for, secondments, short-term assignments. And I went, what? How could that happen? So he's like, yeah, go talk to so-and-so. And I did, and I got shot down. And it took 4 years of me going, can I, please, somebody let me in? Before I finally got a 6-month assignment there, released from my duties here in NOAA. At the time I was at the Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Program, OAR, and yeah, I got there, got to WMO, worked on satellites and metadata related group, and then it just so happens that this job in the Weather Service came up to help them with their coordination for. At the time, they didn't tell me it was climate. They just said weather, water, and climate is the sphere for WMO. And I just, when I interviewed, they went, oh yeah, this is the climate portfolio, and I have some background in climate, and they took a chance on me, and I took a chance on them. But it's worked out really well. I absolutely love what we do.
That's great. Can you talk a little bit about the WMO? What does it do, and who participates in this organization?
Right. So the WMO is a specialized United Nations agency, and its sphere of influence is coordination of weather, water, and climate activities for the different governments that are associated with the United Nations. So the member states that are members of the UN tend to be members of the WMO. And each country is represented by a permanent representative that is appointed by the equivalent of their Department of State, their foreign ministries. And in the case of the United States, it happens to be the director of our National Weather Service, Dr. Uccellini. So that's where they are. They do have a hydrological advisor sometimes. So oftentimes you'll find out that the permanent representative for a country could be the hydrological person rather than a meteorological person. It just depends on the country and how they set up themselves.
All right. So being this international convener, is their role sort of to get the nations together to try to do things like standardized data observations and data sharing? And because obviously what's happening across the globe is of interest to all of us. The atmosphere is this shared resource, and without those observations from one place, it's hard for us to make predictions for another place.
Right. So because it's under the sphere of the UN, we're kind of all locked in sync and kumbaya for coordination with weather, water, and climate. As we know, none of these things have boundaries. So WMO is the holder of standards for collecting observations and how best to provide a service to this particular group of people, what kind of modeling should be done, coordination of the various activities to support different research activities. People do joint programs, they do pilot programs together. WMO is organized according to regions. So the US is a part of the North America, Central America, and Caribbean, so that's region 4. So we often do shared activities together and capacity development within each region, especially with the US. The US, we have so much capacity, we end up spending a lot of our time sharing our experts with the various groups and expert teams of the WMO to come up with these standards, come up with these training modules, and actually conduct training.
Okay, so the U.S., it maybe isn't a huge surprise, but the U.S. is at least a regional leader in these forums, and probably we're a big international player, I'd imagine, as well.
Absolutely, but don't forget, we have a nice neighbor to our north, Canada, who also has a pretty big stake in the game in this region too.
All right, great. So earlier we were talking a little bit about your job ahead of the show, and you mentioned that you're preparing for something called the WMO Congress. Can you tell us what this is and what is the position of the United States going into the Congress?
Right, so every 4 years, this intergovernmental group comes together to set the strategies for the next 4-year financial period. So strategies and priorities and pretty much how WMO should organize itself to go forward. So this year, it's actually now, so June 3rd through 14th is CG, Congress 18. And the big thing on the docket this year is actually a complete reform of the WMO. They have a new strategic plan that's more focused on integrating across the disciplines. So interdisciplinary work is becoming a big thing at WMO. It's Earth system science, it's seamless predictions. It is breaking down the barriers between weather, water, and climate. It is bringing in geographers, hey Kim, and folks like you to help with coordinating the services, the sciences for people, and making it relevant to society and decision making. So all of that is a part of the new strategy that is being put forward for the WMO. And to do that, WMO's reform is all about breaking down the stovepipes between its current structures. So there are various structures. There's a commission for climatology, commission for basic systems, commission for atmospheric sciences, for hydrology, blah, 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 blah. All of them stovepipes. Each of them have teams that just replicate the work that they're doing. They are breaking all of that apart, and their proposal is in place now where they're trying to decide if they're going to have 2 separate commissions, just one for services and one for infrastructure, and then have a research board, science advisory panel, and completely reform themselves. So that is the biggest thing on the docket this year. But then there's also minutia. For instance, there are new centennial long-term observation programs, and they're being awarded the centennial stations. So they're updating the document to say this observing station in this country, at this GPS unit, that needs to be in the document. Here you go, document updated to include that. Do you agree? That kind of minutia is also being done at the WMO this week.
Shanna, Troy Kimmel here. Nice to have you with us tonight, by the way.
I can actually hear Troy. If someone can repeat what Troy says to me.
I'm here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, sure.
I can hear you.
Okay.
You're loud and clear.
Okay, cool. Shanna, with the WMO, I've always sort of kind of understood in a sense that they're sort of like the playground cop in a sense when dealing with the different agencies around the world, and to ensure openness of data, make sure that data is available from other countries. I've always thought it's probably pretty interesting when you're in your type position that we need to remember the United States is technologically more advanced than some other countries in the world. And so does WMO work with these other agencies to try to ensure openness of making sure data is shared freely between the countries?
Okay, so I see you stop talking. So I think the question was something related to equal representation within WMO by participating countries.
Well, basically just making sure that there's a sharing of weather data between the agencies around the world.
Yeah, if James or Kim can repeat what Troy had to say, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think, Kim, can you just pass on the audio from Troy to Shanna? For some reason, I think Shanna can hear you, but not Troy.
That's right. I can hear everybody but Troy.
Yeah.
That's convenient. Sorry, Troy.
No, it's James's fault. It's all James's fault. We know that.
No, I'm using Chrome. I'm using Chrome.
So Shanna, did you see what I put in the chat? Basically what he's interested in, he understands that his perspective on WMO is it's kind of like the playground cop, and making sure that everyone plays nicely, and that it assures that there's a sharing of weather data between the various agencies, providers of the world. And I think as you're talking about those documents, that minutia, is that really what you're talking about? That they're trying to set those standards that everybody can play fairly on the playground together?
They are trying their best to do that. So the data sharing one is actually a policy that signed up to do on the last Congress 4 years ago. So these big policy decisions like open data is definitely one of the things you described that would happen at the WMO. That being said, though these documents and these decisions are agreed to by the countries, nothing is actually binding. There is no body that's going to come by and go, no, 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 no. But it's kind of, it's almost a little bit of interpersonal and slight shaming if you don't comply when you say you would at the WMO. But there is no actual binding agreement here. So there's no fine, there's no UN agency that's going to come around and yank your status from you, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So if there's nothing binding, is it sort of something that the U.S. does, U.S. and perhaps other nations that have the means? Is it something that we try to step in and help member nations to meet those objectives if they can't do so on their own?
We try our best to do that. Sometimes it's not through the WMO. Sometimes we work with donors. For instance, the World Bank and the USAID. Groups such as those, that they would be the ones to help with the coordination of improving the service in the country or improving an observance system or a particular program and bringing them up to speed. So developing the capacity of that program to comply with the things in WMO and the standards that the rest of the world is following. And then in that context, then yes, oftentimes a US person is invited to help with the preparations to do that.
Okay, great. Troy, do you need any other translation? Any follow-up questions?
No, I'm going to ask a question. We get to talking about Louis Ussolini and that election coming up, the WMO, but I'll wait till we discuss that topic a little more.
Okay, great. Shanna, he's very interested in asking some questions about Dr. Uccellini when we get there. So how about we just go there? Tell us a little bit about Dr. Uccellini, and he is running for president of this organization. What is it that presidents of WMO do?
Right. So big distinction between the Secretary General of the WMO and the President of the WMO. So the president position that he's running for is really to represent all the member states within the actual UN organization. So every country, all the permanent representatives, he will be working to reach consensus amongst them at these meetings. So he'll be Congress meetings, he'll be running the Executive Council meetings, he'll be maintaining neutrality as a lot of these things, a lot of the policies and procedures that are being discussed at the WMO are being discussed, but he is making sure that we have some kind of coordinated, yes, good cop, nice playground rules when we're there in these sessions. And then he also gets to lend WMO's gravitas to particular activities that are of interest to the advancement of WMO's priorities. So for Earth system science or open data, he would be the one to be championing that. He'll be showing up at specialized open science conferences by the WMO, and saying few words to open the meeting and to set the stage that this is where the world is trying to go. So the WMO president will be going around to these, doing those kind of campaign almost for WMO priorities and strategies.
Really interesting. Troy, what kinds of questions do you have about this process or about Dr. Uccellini pursuing this?
Yeah, and it's one that you'll have to tell Shanna that we sat down. Actually, Aubrey and I did back in Louisville, in Columbus, Starkville, Mississippi, with with Louis, I guess a couple of months ago during that March meeting, and he was telling us about this. And even though we think we hung the moon and we're the best in the world in the U.S., it's not necessarily something where we can make the assumption that Louis Uccellini will take this role. It's an election of worldwide people. In other words, it's not necessarily an assumption that Louis wins this election, right?
Oh, yeah. So what he's talking about, he had the chance to sit down with Dr. Uccellini. He and Aubrey, another one of our panelists, had the chance to talk with him at a meeting in Mississippi recently. And, he was talking about this process and his priorities. And Troy had to wonder, it's not a foregone conclusion that Dr. Uccellini will win, right? Is he up against others? And Troy, do you have another nuance to that question you'd like to ask?
No, you did it very well, Kim. You did it so well.
Okay, great. Yeah, this isn't just an election for appearances. Is he up against some other people? How does that work?
Right. So there is at least one other very good candidate that's out there. Germany has put forward their permanent representative, Dr. Gerhard Adrian, and he has been very active in reform process for the WMO and also on executive council, similar to what Dr. Uccellini does. So very strong contender, and we just have to hope for Dr. Uccellini's expertise and smiling and happy personality to win this one. But it is not a foregone conclusion. We have to do this campaign and hope for the best.
All right. So it's so interesting. Germany, that contender, does he work with the Deutsche Wetterdienst, the German Meteorological Service? Do you know?
So I think actually he's supposed to be the PR, the head of the DWD.
He's the head of the DWD. Okay, yeah. So he's the equivalent of Dr. Uccellini, but for Germany.
That's correct.
That is really interesting, especially since the European nations' meteorological services can work so differently from the U.S.'s. So it's just it'll be really interesting to see how all of that shakes out. When are the elections?
I believe it's actually in a few hours. It's the 11th.
Oh.
So they're 7 hours ahead, so they should be starting to stir in their beds to get up to go to these meetings.
Wow. Kim, can you ask Shanna one other question? I did not know this, but you have to be the head of the agency for the time of your election. If you should not be the head of the agency, you also have to drop back from the WMO, I believe, as well. So one question I asked Louis was, will you still be our director of the National Weather Service? He says, I have to be. If I step back as director of the Weather Service, then I have to step off WMO as well.
Yeah, so Troy was just saying one of the things he found fascinating in talking to Dr. Uccellini is it's a requirement to be part of the WMO. You have to be the head of the weather agency for your country. And so they asked, well, gosh, to be WMO president, do you need to step down? And he said, no, actually, I have to still be the director of the National Weather Service. So tell us a little bit about that. He's essentially adding this to his plate.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't have enough to do. The U.S. has nothing whatsoever he has to worry about. No, Dr. Uccellini as the WMO, as the elected WMO president, will have to pass the mantle of head of the delegation to the meetings to another U.S. person when they're there. So he himself, as the president, would still need to maintain neutrality for the activities, but other folks in the delegation will step up to the mic to speak on behalf of the United States. That's how he that's the way
Wow.
that would work. But in the off season, so not at these Congress and Executive Council meetings, he is still the voice of the United States, and he still will need to coordinate with the other agencies and government agencies within the U.S. on what we think about the different issues as they come up throughout the years.
Yeah, so Shanna, I'm saying, whoa, 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 whoa here. How do you do that? Isn't that a conflict of interest? How does he maintain neutrality?
You know, all the other countries were able to do it. The outgoing president was David Grimes of Canada, and he was able to do a good job. You know, it's just a part of, it's just a part of your professional development here. You just step back. You know where WMO, based on the country's constituent bodies, the commissions, the expert teams, you know where they were trying to go. You know that this was the recommendation put forward by the best experts that you have. So the job there would be to convince the countries who did not get to partake of putting together that particular policy or that expert document, and convince them that this is a good thing to do. So you're on behalf of the body of work that was done by experts is really where you're going. You're not really speaking up to say, well, the U.S. thinks this is a good idea, therefore we all should. No, it's really all the experts thought this was a great idea. And then the U.S. will have to say or not. U.S. could come in and say, no, we don't like it too, you know.
You know, so it is interesting when we chatted a little bit earlier, again, you know, in prep for this, you were talking about the outgoing president. He's from Canada. And you talked a little bit about his advancing of some goals with the Arctic. First, I think this actually kind of addresses John's point a little bit in that maybe they don't have a conflict of interest, but they are perhaps able to give some attention to issues that are particularly pertinent to them. Can you describe a little bit of what they were doing with the Arctic? What was he trying to advance?
Right. So, as I said, the outgoing president was from Canada, and there were quite a few initiatives that came up over the last 4 years to advance Arctic sciences and cooperation in that particular arena. For instance, there was a polar prediction project that came about actually in one of his earlier terms that made a year of polar prediction, and that allowed countries in the Arctic states to coordinate their release of extra radio sondes and run experiments, and you know, they've encouraged scientists to work together in areas that we previously wouldn't want to work. So if a ship drifted into waters that we normally would get locked up to go into, you know, there was coordination.
Yeah, for people who aren't familiar, just think about the geography of the Arctic. just think about that for just a moment. It can get interesting, can get fun, increasingly important too, actually, as we become more neighborly.
Exactly. So the Arctic has been quite neighborly. So WMO has pushed to become an observer to the Arctic Council, which has been convening of governments of these 8 Arctic nations to work together on sciences. So so that's one big thing that the WMO president was able to push on. And then as time went on, we also came together to develop a Pan-Arctic Regional Climate Center that coordinated seasonal predictions for temperature, precipitation, and sea ice. And that's currently in demonstration phase, but that's another thing that the WMO president actually, you know, was pretty strong in making sure that there was an executive council group that provided some oversight, and they actually came up with the services that were necessary that the RCC, which is the Regional Climate Center, would put forward. He actually put some of his gravitas behind that. So it's still what the organization and what the experts recommended, but he was able to say, well, here are some things, some opportunities that could help move the needle on global things.
What do you think about that, Dr. John?
I'm just thinking that whoever becomes president of the WMO has an amazing skill set. Excuse me. So you're talking about someone with a scientific background who has current knowledge of a broad spectrum of issues within our field, but yet can display and demonstrate a diplomacy which probably our own government can use some insight on. I think this individual is a remarkable individual.
Truly. Yeah, that can't be an easy job at all. And Shanna, can you just tell us a little bit about, has the U.S. ever tried to be, do you know if the U.S. has sent someone to try to serve in this role before Dr.
Yeah,
Uccellini?
Good question.
As a WMO president, I am actually not aware of us advancing a candidate. However, my work here has only been for the last 3 to 4 years, so who knows, before me, if there was such a thing. But I'm not familiar with that. One thing I wanted to add to John's comment, though, is not only does this person need to have those qualifications, but they need to do a lot of change management, because now with the WMO reform, they have to completely break down the structure that's been in place for the last 40 years and come up with something that's going to set the stage for the relevance of WMO in the future. So this is a pretty big task as well.
Wow. That strikes me as just an enormous task. You have to sort of be aware of the geopolitics, right? Because, I mean, even just thinking about what you were talking about with the Arctic, let's be real. We're talking about some very serious contenders for natural resources that are becoming available in the Arctic. For example, the Arctic isn't just a fun playground for sending ships across for pleasure cruises. It's becoming a really important economic engine and national security interest. It has long been a national security interest. So the idea that the nations would come together to do something like monitor the ice, that seems to me to be a non-trivial undertaking, especially for the countries that are in play. Can you tell us a little bit about some of, you don't have to get too political about it, but really just how interesting can it get trying to bring member nations together around some of these goals?
As I said, the Arctic has actually, on the science side of the Arctic, it actually has been quite congenial. And we have, through the WMO, have been able to amass some really nice experts. So the biggest experts, that's the head of the expert team on sea ice, actually comes from Russia. And, the country is happy to put forward this scientist to help out with the seasonal predictions and the monitoring. Our organization, we work with Canada on developing a North American Ice Service. So we put forward, our teams, the National Ice Center, and this partnership we have with the North American Ice Service, we put forward some of the work that they do there as well. And then CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, we are a global producing center for long range, let me see if I can get the acronym right, NNME. So the the multi-model ensembles, we are a global producing center. So we work with Canada on ensemble forecasting, and we just have that as something that we work with Canada to push for the entire Arctic. So it's been good cooperation in the Arctic. And I think WMO has played a great role in that.
That is absolutely fascinating to hear. Can you describe for our listening audience a little bit about what monitoring the Arctic has included? And you have some insight too about efforts to try to band together the scientists that are doing research in the Arctic to make meaning of their observations as a whole. It's just this interesting frontier that is so incredibly important, but we don't get to hear a whole lot about it. What can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier the Year of Polar Prediction. So YOP is coordinated through this Polar Prediction Project of the WMO under the World Research Program. And they have done special observing periods in the Arctic and the Antarctic, actually, where, as I said, folks do additional radiosonde launches. They send out additional ships. If they have some UAVs that can take some measurements, they do that. If they can drop some more buoys, there are people that have put forward special model runs with the various steps of the new models and reanalysis so that there can be some work done to improve all the forecast models that are of use in the Arctic and the global models. So yeah, they have done tremendous work so far, and it is continuing. There's an upcoming experiment that's called Mosaic, and I can never get the acronym right, so don't ask me for it. But look up Mosaic, WMO and YOP. And what it is something about interdisciplinary study of the Arctic. Maybe that's what it was. But
wow.
Anyway.
Way to make up an acronym. That's really good. I buy it.
But what it is actually they're going to put a ship in the ice have it float in, drift in for a year, and they'll bring students, they'll bring scientists, they'll do observations, they'll do experiments, and countries around the world will do additional launches to support them. And all this rich data set will be available for years to come. It's going to be under the WMO standards for metadata. It will be shared. Can be exploited for years. So this is a rich data set that WMO has facilitated.
Wow, that is fascinating. Can you guys imagine a field project where you go on a ship to get locked in ice and then just sent along where the ice carries you?
No, I hope that's a double hull. Don't want to get crushed along the way. That's a remarkable plan for international cooperation. Fantastic. I did my PhD work in Brazil, and it was a multinational project that was actually headed up by NASA. And there was a lot of very interesting relationships that took place just trying to get equipment in and out of Brazil. So I'm just thinking from the international perspective of everyone agreeing to move their own packages into and out of a ship. Not a trivial task.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the logistics of refueling and sending supplies up, you're going to have a train of icebreakers bringing things in. It is quite an undertaking, but they've done it. This thing is going to happen.
That's great. Wow.
That is pretty exciting. So tell us, we were talking a little bit about, data sharing, and the purpose of the WMO is really to try to facilitate some of these efforts. Are there, what are some of the big outstanding issues right now in trying to either standardize the observations that are taken or to share what exists?
Well, we currently have something called the WMO Integrated Global Observance System, WIGOS, which is really how they do the standards, the metadata standards, for all observations. So right now, they're still working on actually populating the databases with the information, and it's pretty complex. This is the project I actually worked on for 6 months when I was there. It is absolutely insane the amount of work it takes to standardize metadata, the different types of fields you need to collect, and maintaining the data set. And it's real. People don't want to do it. It takes a lot of work. And for countries like America, where we have thousands, millions of data points and data sets, if you hadn't already invested in that particular metadata standard and been following it throughout the years, you have a monumental task ahead of you to comply. So that's a big outstanding issue, getting all the countries to comply and get the data sets in the right format.
Well, so we actually face this challenge because we have so much that we've collected. So trying to standardize it might actually be a little bit tough for us.
Yeah.
To be in compliance.
It's not just operational data sets. They hope to do research as well, and research data sets are a whole different ballgame.
Very cool. I just find this whole idea of working together to achieve the goals of the collective for everyone really interesting. But there's also this aspect that you have worked in some to try to bring what does exist to other countries. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the efforts that have gone on to bring data observations to other countries to enhance their decision support services within country services?
Okay, let me see if I can tackle that one. So
I know it's a small question.
Right.
I don't throw softballs.
Well, I'm trying to think of good examples here, so I'm just going to start generically. We have, as I said, we have experts in everything in America. We have quite a few people in academia that are leaders in metadata, that are leaders in a particular type of observance system, and very often the U.S. is asked to send people to countries to work on it. And I don't know if I mentioned this before when I was talking, but our partners like USAID and the World Bank and such usually are the ones to help foot the bill with the country, give the country the money, and then those countries will invite experts. U.S. also works in the teams, the expert teams of the WMO. develop the standards. They develop, how, what, where, why, to maintain the observing systems. And these are things that are brought to the country. I can't think of, in my sphere, because I work in climate, so I can't think of my particular organization or my particular sphere right now, a specific example.
That might happen more in the weather side.
Yeah, so you have to talk to my colleague, Fred Bransky.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about, okay, so you have gotten to work climate side in representing U.S. interests in some of the climate stuff. Tell us a little bit about how many people does the U.S. get to send to this? And this is because it's part of the UN, right? This all happens in Geneva, Switzerland.
Yes.
Is that right?
And we have State Department will accredit or delegation. So, you have to limit the numbers. And or delegation is not always just government. We'll have private sector partners as well, academia. And then, of course, Department of State folks that are part of the delegation. So, yeah, the numbers from the Weather Service was quite limited. I think maybe we had about 30.
Okay.
It's still a pretty big delegation because this is the Congress. We don't send that many very often for commission meetings. So there are going to be 2 new commissions. So in the past, there were like 6 or 7 commissions. Those commission meetings, you'd send maybe 5 people on the U.S. delegation. Yeah.
Okay.
So Shannon, I have to ask, what is the WMO's budget, and who approves that budget?
Congress approves the budget. Congress being WMO Congress. So that's another thing that they're debating over this 2-week period. The budget, it's tricky. So they're part of the UN. So the breakdown of how much money they get is a part of how UN gets money from countries. So US is 22% of the UN budget, so we're 22% of the WMO budget. But there are other parts of it. So there could be agreements with, say, USAID that WMO would have made, and then there would be money shared directly, or like a program that they've appealed to the USAID for, and the USAID thinks it's a good thing for fast development. Therefore, they'll send money that way. So there are other non-UN specific ways to get money within the WMO. And WMO has been doing a lot on trying to work with resourcing partners. That's another one of their priorities, to do optimal resourcing for the activities of the WMO and working better with the donors.
That's an even bigger challenge than I thought.
Yeah, there's.
Hey, let's get right to the important stuff here. How do you get a seat on the committee to name tropical cyclones? That's all I want.
Actually, funny enough, that's one of mine, actually. So that was under the Commission for Atmospheric Sciences. They do have an expert team there for the tropical cyclones. And yes, you have to be nominated by the U.S. Permanent Representative. And it's put forward, and they decide whether they want you or not.
I'd love to get somebody from this show on that committee, and then all of our names can be represented as tropical cyclones at some point over the next 6 years.
Can you imagine that?
I know that this is, of all the things to be disappointed about, this is a very minor footnote in history. But when Katrina was retired, I'd looked across all the basins, right, and there hasn't been a Kim. I don't know how that has not occurred. It's probably actually a good thing. Who wants to have a catastrophe named after them? But I thought this will be my time. And I think that they actually replaced it with like Katie or something. And I looked at it and I went, or it wasn't Katie. I think it was actually something more obscure for the U.S. I think it was like Katya. And whatever it was, I looked at it and I said, dang it, it's just never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, but
that's why we need somebody. Yeah. We need somebody from this show on that WMO committee. So somehow that needs to happen. And then we'll get Kim on the list.
We'll try to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll do it.
But I think people do need to understand that those names have to reflect the nationalities of all the nations
correct.
that could be impacted by a tropical cyclone. People often don't understand that, but it's not just a United States thing. This is a WMO thing.
Yeah. Hey, Kim, can you ask Shanna for me when we'll know who was elected? I know the election starts shortly, but when will we know the results of the worldwide election?
Yeah, Shanna, okay, so you mentioned that the elections are going on. When will we know the result?
I think if I haven't gotten my dates crossed, we will find out at the end of the day for Geneva time for the 11th, which is tomorrow.
Oh,
we should find out then. If I haven't gotten my dates crossed.
All right, so soon. Well, we won't have a countdown on the show then
Right.
for the election results. We're not going to be like a CNN
no.
getting the poll numbers, exit polls. Dr. Uccellini's ahead. Deutsche Wetterdienst is ahead. It's neck and neck. How are people even selected to run for this?
So they have to be appointed by their foreign ministries or Department of State equivalent. So,
all right, so our Department of State put Dr. Uccellini forward?
That's correct. Dr. Uccellini thought, based on the reform and the activities that are upcoming, that he really wanted to play a role in the change for WMO. And he worked with the Department of State to get that accreditation, and he was
Wow.
Wow. The things you never knew that, I mean, this is the director of the National Weather Service. Has anyone listening to this show ever thought that he would be working with the Department of State? And it makes sense in this context, but I don't think it's anything that you would ever imagine that job would entail. And what possibly prepares you to do something like that? I mean, Shanna, can you speak to what in your background prepared you to work in an international space like this, international diplomacy for science?
Oh man, I wish I knew. I think it's just an interest, and the fact that I got the 6 months there and got to work with all these people, and I coordinated across our region 4, the North America, Canada, and well, that's North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. On some of these WIGUS, bringing WIGUS to the region 4, it just kind of helped me to get a little bit of perspective for what was needed and not needed. And yeah, we just went from there. And luckily in my office, our director actually is, she has a very deep background in international relations. So between her and her expertise and the other folks in our office who's been there for quite a while working these issues, it brought me up to speed. And then when Dr. Uccellini came on in 2017, we spent a lot of time to just make sure that he understood all the rules, where we can go, where we couldn't go. And, I think he actually gave us an award for it, for bringing him up to speed.
Nice. It's just such an interesting job that you have. And this might be, I'm going to divert a little bit from WMO stuff to something that's, I think, of international interest that falls into some of your background. You've worked with satellite data in the past and satellite observations. Have you worked any or know very much about the current debates going on about the transmission of data from satellites and the current controversy about selling off some of the channels to the private sector? Can you at least describe a little bit about what that debate is about?
Yeah, so again, this is personal. This is from my personal knowledge, not because I follow this for my career. But my understanding is that the spectrum that is currently being auctioned off, the so-called 5G network, is the same frequencies that the satellite bands are using for water vapor to actually understand how much is available in the atmosphere. So this is a physical boundary here. This is something that this is where water actually reacts in the atmosphere. It's not like we can move the spectrum. It just so happens that this is the frequencies that the cellular community thinks they can use, and to send the data across. One particular thing about it that I've heard is there's bleeding. It's not as though they're taking a particular band. They're taking near to it. So they're taking on either side of the actual water vapor channel.
Right. That was my
and there's bleeding from it that will start degrading the actual signal that you see.
Right.
So that's my understanding of the issue.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Can just point it out that this is what's happening. The powers that be in international, there actually are international bodies working on this, and yeah, they are going to have a big fight on their hands.
It sounds like you know quite a bit about this, Dr. John. It's really interesting to me that something that's so critical for our science might be in a position to get degraded this way. What have your thoughts been on it?
Yeah, but this first came to our attention when I was part of the leadership within the NWA. When we started talking about issuing statements from the NWA to elected officials, just asking the question, are you aware that by infringing on these frequencies, which are absolutely paramount to our use of water vapor and other satellite spectrums, are you aware that you're doing that and what the possible implications are? And I know the NWA is still working on this issue right now because we're getting really close to making a decision on this. And I just think we need to somehow raise awareness. These satellite frequencies are not just there always. We're talking about losing them and losing our capability to actually, hey, look at tropical cyclones, look at developing mid-latitude cyclones. This is absolutely critical to maintaining the tenet of what we do as a weather service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of things that are in Dr. Uccellini's wheelhouse, I don't think I'm making this up. I feel like, well, I know the first part of this I'm not making up. The second part, someone might need to check me. But the first part, Dr. Uccellini had, he loves to talk about the case of Sandy and how well our prediction systems worked there, and the value of especially adding additional observations. They did additional radiosonde launches ahead of that, and assimilating all of that data improved our capability. He's been a huge proponent of improving Earth observations in general, and especially as we've improved our satellite capabilities, it's been something that's of interest to him. I feel like there was a data denial experiment done with that case or another that's kind of close to his heart, that demonstrated the potential loss from this band. And I do think that there's reason to be concerned for what could happen to our ability to make predictions. This is something that Dr. Neil Jacobs, who is the current acting administrator of NOAA, recently gave congressional testimony on. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the NOAA position about this, you can look up his testimony. And it essentially centered around this concern that it would degrade forecast quality. And it seems short-sighted. We just put a new satellite into orbit, GO-16, and it had a great instrument on it that could make use of this channel. So to degrade the quality of transmission, think about this. We paid all that money to get a satellite up into space that we effectively can't use. It just it strikes me as I know it's a challenging space, but this is a potentially big loss. And is this something that the show, have we talked about this very much? I feel like this is something that's kind of under a lot of people's radar, but is a potentially really big issue, potentially even more important for the U.S. And our increasing our forecasting capabilities than Dr. Uccellini becoming WMO president.
Yeah.
Well, I agree.
We'll see.
I agree.
We'll see what happens with that. Do we know when that decision is coming down? Shanna, do you know?
No, I do not.
Something to look out for. That'll be another of the things happening sort of in the political sphere. I feel like in meteorology, that's the biggie right now. We'll just see. I think it's the FCC that will decide ultimately. So be looking for news on that in the days and weeks to come. Well, Shanna, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show tonight. I want to close by, you talked a lot about the various organizations that have been part of international relations and really setting up and running the field of meteorology. We are a field that's predicated on international relationship and on sharing data and observations. can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do in your role within our country? You do some coordinating among academic institutions and federal agencies, because what you ultimately do is you take all of that and then you put it forward in this international sphere. What does it look like to work within our own country and try to get ducks in a row?
It is a very congenial atmosphere. We have many bodies that we work with. We formed our own interagency working group that we share a lot of these documents and positions with and get some feedback with the different agencies. In my sphere, there's the US GCRP, so the Global Change Research Program. There's also the Office of the Federal Coordinator for Meteorology. They also host an interagency weather research coordination committee, IWRCC. They host that body as well, and we share we discuss a lot of the things coming up in WMO and where we stand. And we also put forward experts that are recommended from these groups on the different expert teams. So I get to work with and find people in academia through UCAR and other groups to serve on, an expert team for sea ice, as I mentioned, or an expert team for the statement of the global climate that WMO puts forward. These are things that, as I said, we love sharing our expertise with the world. And it's always an honor to go out and find someone. We'll work with our colleagues in NESDES and in OAR to reach out to not just within their organizations, but outside of it as well. USGS and USDA and whoever it is has expertise and put them forward.
Well, I've got to say, it sounds like a lot of fun. And if there's ever an opportunity, where you need a behavioral scientist to serve in any of these bodies, you mentioned geographers earlier, I'd be delighted. I just want to announce my availability to serve as an underling to a subcommittee for anything. It just sounds great. You guys, you should be Shanna's friend on Facebook. I am. We went to the Weather and Society Integrated Studies workshop together a little over 10 years ago. God, time flies. And watching your career has been just a delight. And the vacations, the trips that you get to take for work, they shouldn't call them vacations, they're work trips, are just incredible. So if there's ever anything I can do, I just want you to know I'd be happy to.
Well, I will tell people when WMO puts out the self-nominations for teams, do take part of them. Put your name forward. Sometimes they are actually looking for people with interdisciplinary skills. Under the reform, that is something they're looking for. So feel free, when you see these calls come out, put your name forward. They would love to have you. They want gender balance. They want representation across all spheres. But put your names forward when you get a chance to.
Is there a listserv for something we can sign up for to get these alerts? I'm serious, guys. I really would love to do this.
When I get them, I've started reaching out to even AMS to send them out. So USGCRP is climate related. If it's a big one, for instance, the large one that just came out was called self-nominations for the Science Advisory Panel. Now this will be 15 of our esteemed colleagues, so very senior scientists, all over the world coming together. Well, that one we shared with UCAR and AMS and as many groups as possible, and they sent them out. Of course, they probably targeted special listservs, but they put it out there. So it does get out. Depending on the level that's being called for, it will be shared.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for joining us tonight. Turn it over to the panel if you have any final questions before James takes it.
Yeah, Shannon, just one question. We hear a lot from students, and what Kim has been asking, I just want to summarize again, or ask you to summarize again. What would you be looking for in a prospective student? What kind of coursework should they be taking? What kind of experiences, what kind of internships do you think would set them up for a position within the WMO down their career?
You know what, WMO, despite the fact that they seem to be very policy oriented, they need experts. So spend the time actually developing your career as an expert in your field. Because without that, you cannot bring what you need to set the standards and work with the top people in other organizations. You got to be on that. So whatever you would do to become that expert, you do that.
Excellent advice. Thank you.
All right, Shannon, thank you so much. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Are you on social media or email or what?
Well, I don't know if I should put my NOAA email out there, but I guess people can just email me, my name.noah at my name and at noah.go. I'm not.
There you go. If you
Instagram on any of that stuff, and my Facebook is for family and friends.
Okay, so I understand. Well, listen, thanks a lot for taking the time. You spent an hour with us. You're very gracious to do that, and we got some great information tonight. And thank you so much for giving us your time and being on the show this week.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Shannon.
Bye.
All right. Take a quick break here. We're going to run Tony Rice in the Astronomy Report. We're going to come back with Picks of the Week and a whole lot more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
This is a great week to look for Jupiter. Tonight, June 10th, our solar system's largest planet is at opposition, with a point in its orbit where it's directly opposite the Sun from our vantage point here on Earth. Tomorrow night, June 11th, Jupiter will also be at its closest point to Earth of the year. Together, that makes for a big, bright Jupiter, rising around sunset, reaching the highest point sometime after midnight, and setting around sunrise. It's still going to look like a bright point of light in the sky, though, but it's the second brightest after the moon. A decent pair of binoculars, though, can reveal Jupiter's 4 largest moons. Tonight they line up Ganymede and Europa on the left, Jupiter in the middle, Io and Callisto on the right. By Sunday, that lineup shuffles around to Callisto, Ganymede, Io, and Europa, all on the left side of Jupiter. Check the Twitter account Jupiter Moon Pause for the current lineup. It tweets every few hours. It has to, because Speedy Io completes the trip around Jupiter about every 42 Earth hours. Elsewhere in the California skies, a Falcon 9 rocket is planned for launch on Wednesday, June 12th at 7:17 a.m. from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. The launch is expected to be visible from Central and Southern California. This time, the payload is RadarSat, a trio of identical satellites for the Canadian government. Each is equipped with a synthetic aperture radar, which will provide maritime surveillance, ecosystem monitoring, agriculture and climate change monitoring, as well as helping with disaster relief efforts. In particular, these satellites are expected to help better map sea ice and permafrost in the Arctic, as well as monitor highways, overpasses, and bridges a little closer to the border. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
So Aubrey is on vacation this week, and we'll do an email segment when we have her back on the show. But I've had a number of people request a couple of things. First off, the Dallas situation. Troy had a comment on Twitter today. Apparently, a number of people are saying it struck without warning.
No, there's
I don't believe that there's any truth to that.
No, there's not. That National Weather Service Fort Worth, and also in combination with our colleagues at the Storm Prediction Center up in Norman, had outlooked that area and talked about that strong winds were expected down into the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So if it was struck without warning, it's because, or struck by surprise, it's because it's surprise on your part, not on the Weather Service's part. You need to start paying attention. That's what I say to people that mostly say it's struck by surprise. It doesn't indicate the Weather Service did anything wrong. It indicates you better pay better attention to the weather.
Yeah, as I see it, the Storm Prediction Center had an enhanced risk out early in the day in the day one outlook, and that's a pretty significant message there. And then the severe thunderstorm warning was issued from the Weather Service in Fort Worth at 1:16 for Tarrant and Dallas counties when the storms were moving in from the north. The hazard was 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts. And to me, it looked like the warning system should have worked fine. And I wonder if it's the problem of people not paying attention to severe thunderstorm warnings. Is that still a problem?
Well, I'll tell you something else. And Kim, you can hop in on this as well. Remember, it's the middle of the day on Sunday. The day of the week, I think, Kim, unless I'm way off in left field, which people have told me that I am, I still consider that a Sunday a day off for a lot of folks. We saw it to some degree in the Joplin, Missouri tornado. It was a Sunday evening at 5:45. So I assume that does play a part, right, Kim?
It does. You're right. It's are people near their TVs? Are they in their sort of normal day-to-day situation? Weekends people tend to be out. They're shopping. They're at church. They're with friends. They're weekending. Things can get disrupted, and your ability to just receive information about the weather can go down. I feel like Sunday is even worse than Saturday, because Saturday you're at least coming off of the week. If there hasn't been buildup about Sunday, starting at least on Friday, you might not get a lot of information about it if you're doing other stuff on the weekend and not watching your evening news, whatever it is that we usually get weather information from coworkers, from friends. Everything changes on weekends. So no, you're right on that. I think that Sunday plays a role in being surprised by things. I experienced, some of that around me too. I felt like everyone that I knew was very surprised. We had quite a bit of damage in Norman from that system as well before it made its way down to Texas. And yeah, it was a bad northwesterly flow event that happens when you transition into the summer pattern. Yep. I think that the summer pattern is just taking people by surprise. Like, oh, the supercell thunderstorms ended and this has started. Yeah. Great. One thing after another.
Well, that's what I guess we'll see that to some degree as we go deeper into the summer, because this has been a very active year. This spring has just been a mess, and not necessarily easy to predict in many ways. And you got to wonder what the next few months, and will it be the normal summer type weather pattern, the death ridge that James has been underneath over there, or are we going to see things like this? And even in the next couple of days, even if I'm not mistaken, Kim, North Texas, Oklahoma back in a marginal risk by late tomorrow for the next couple of days in a northwest flow event.
Yeah. Yep. It's that can get us those MCSs. It tends to be a different kind of convection, but man, that can get us. We've had more damage here in my neighborhood from that event that happened on Sunday than we had from any of the storms that came by. Even that storm produced a tornado, the 4 a.m. tornado, just 3 miles from my house. Sometimes these complexes of storms that produce high winds can actually be much more damaging, but I think they tend to get a little bit less attention, and people tend to report that they're a little bit more surprised because they're not promoted as much as tornadoes. They just don't seem as scary, but they can do a lot.
And I still say a lot of people don't pay any attention to severe thunderstorm warnings. A tornado warning, they'll focus on that. They'll listen to it. Their phone goes off with WEA. It doesn't, for a severe thunderstorm warning. And I just think they're not that effective. And I don't know the reason. And again, that's a Kim question. Do we have too many of them? We all know that not all severe thunderstorm warnings are the same. You've got some like a derecho type thing where you've got widespread 100 mile per hour winds, or something like the northwest flow thing that happened in Dallas on Sunday. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's people in that business, we have to be better at communicating risks of thunderstorms that are severe, involving straight line winds and not necessarily tornadoes. Tornadoes are sexy, and everybody, hey man, tornado, I'm going to dig a hole. I'm going to do something. But severe thunderstorm warning, it's like meh.
Yeah, well, James, that and Kim to a certain degree as well. When we get reports of strong or wind-related damage, we still have people. I know you do, James, that tell us, "Oh yeah, it was a tornado." Well, did you see the tornado? No, but it blew the barn down. And but did anyone see that? No, but it blew the barn down. It had to be a tornado. And that's what we got to get people beyond thinking, because a lot of this stuff you're seeing was caused by straight line thunderstorm winds.
I'm showing a picture from the damage survey that I did last week. I know that those that are listening cannot see this, obviously, but I just wanted to show you a picture of a very large tree that was taken down by the storm back on May the 29th. For those of you that can't see this, the root ball is the size of a vehicle that's sitting next to it. This was just just a severe thunderstorm warning. But I use pictures like this when I give my talks. I'm sure all of you do the same. This is a killer. These storms are killers. You don't need tornadoes to kill people.
Yeah.
I show pictures like this to say, take a severe thunderstorm warning seriously. This was 75 to 85 mile per hour winds.
So, John,
yeah.
John, this is straight line wind damage, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, good. Just making sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But,
so that's one issue that we wanted to talk about. And another one, obviously, people have been very anxious for us to comment on a situation involving a broadcast meteorologist in, let me get the right screen here, Ohio. And hang on, the ad messages pop up on these things. Are you guys familiar with this story?
Yeah.
Ohio weatherman, and this is the headline from the New York Post here, flips out viewers upset that tornado. Wait a minute, hang on, that's the wrong one. I was talking about the not him, but the situation in
it's in Illinois, right?
Springfield, right? Joe Crane, yes. Right. So that's a wrong screen grab. This was a meteorologist that basically went on the air and was fussing about a corporate mandate about these code red days.
Right.
And let me just say, I will have to kind of recuse myself from this discussion in that I am employed by this company.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I was going to, let me just say one thing before I recuse myself. This is not just a Sinclair thing. Everybody does it. Everybody.
Yeah.
To my knowledge. I mean, all the big corporations have, first alert, storm warn, they declare these days. I'm declaring a code red day. I'm declaring a first alert day. I'm declaring a this. I'm declaring a that. And they get farther and farther out with these things. And my concern is, before you know it, you're going to be calling a code red, whatever, 10 days in advance. And I've seen, and again, not just my company, I've seen other companies call these first alert days when it's foggy, when it's going to rain, when it has absolutely nothing to do with dangerous weather. So he went on an on-air rant. So I'll let you guys air your thoughts on this because I can't.
I'll tell you that I have worked for Sinclair in the past, and I've seen some good things they've done. I've seen some bad things they've done. But I think this is based on my opinion of what I've seen so far. And this is what worries me. If you're going to do this type of policy, that's fine, Sinclair, and that's fine, other station groups. But go talk to your meteorologist in these markets and help define the criteria that you're going to use and how you can find some comfort in that. What I'm seeing in this, and I can tell you, I bet Sinclair is not pleased that this has gotten all the press that it has. But, go talk to your chief Mets in the different cities and find out and allow that criteria to be adjustable by markets. And then have that very clearly spelled out. Don't do that in the absence of your chief meteorologist in your 50 markets around the country. Go get some input locally. I will tell you that I like my time with Sinclair, but the one thing that I didn't like about Sinclair is everything works in Baltimore, so it works in the rest of the country. I'm telling you, go talk to your meteorologist about this and get some input on something like this, and I think it'll work a little better. That's
the criteria aren't local. It's the same criteria nationwide.
My understanding is that Sinclair's refused to point out what the criteria is, and the meteorologists are pointing out they don't have any say in the corporate policy.
Wow. And let me just say this: I'm a Sinclair station. We don't do that here.
Okay.
And I'll just leave it at that.
I'll salute your management.
I've had no problems with Sinclair. They have treated me very well. They have given me the freedom to do everything I need to do to be successful. And I have no problems with them. I've never been mandated to do a first alert, emergency day, whatever all this stuff is. And again, understand, this is not a Sinclair thing. This is a broadcast thing. Everybody's doing this. It's so John or Kim, you have any thoughts on Joe Crane and his situation?
Well, to Troy's comment about working with a meteorologist, when I hear the term You know, I don't know. Is that music coming from my end?
Music?
I don't hear any music.
I don't hear any music,
nothing.
Dr.
Okay,
John.
Sorry. It's just in my head.
It's in your head. Yeah.
But let me tell you my really well-informed opinion about X, Y, Z. But where's
It's
the
just-
music coming from?
I don't hear it here.
Too much helium, I guess, at my end. But
Yeah.
Whoop.
when I hear the term code red, I'm thinking wildfire issues. I'm not. That's when we use terminology that's not widespread and it's more station specific, then we can have some confusion in that regard. Code red to me means I'm thinking about low relative humidity and high winds.
Yeah. Well, I guess the interesting thing that I saw in all this was that, and I may be wrong, maybe you can find it now, but early in this conversation, apparently Sinclair did not want to talk about what their corporate, I guess, criteria happened to be for code red. That's at least my initial impression, and that worried me a little bit. I think you have to know what that criteria is.
Right.
That's interesting. Yeah, it sounds like it's an interesting system.
Yeah, and again, I can't say much here, and you know me, I say whatever I want to say, but and look, apparently everybody loves Joe in that market. He was very well liked. We don't even know what his job status is. He's not saying anything.
We don't.
He's not on the air. There's been no announcement that he's been terminated or suspended. We don't know anything. I mean, I just don't have enough information to comment on that. I do think, and again, I wear a lot of hats. One of my volunteer jobs here, I am the chairman of the board of a big hospital. And I work in that corporate setting over there as a volunteer and I get paid for that. But often any business will have internal disputes where employees have problems with management or policies or procedures. And there are certain ways that you handle that disagreement. And I think, one way is not necessarily airing out your dirty laundry in public like that. I would go to my boss, the news director, or the general manager and express my concern. And if you can't get any satisfaction there, take it to the next level, to the corporate. And if you still just can't get any resolution there, and if you both have different directions, if the corporate folks are going this way, you're going that way, at some point you just need to quit and move on and work for somebody else. But Joe's problem, everybody's doing it. This is not just, all of these big companies are doing the same thing. And I don't like it. I mean, I'm first to say, I have great concern over, trying to message that there's some urgent weather emergency when it's just going to be a foggy morning or it's going to rain at 9 o'clock. That's not an emergency. And after hearing all this over and over and over and over again, what are you going to do when there's a real emergency? You know what I mean?
Yeah. My take on this thing, James, was that the decision locally to go for the red code alert was not a decision made in the weather office. It was a decision made at the news director's level.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my suspicion as well. And you guys earlier said that, the Sinclair higher-ups probably hate that this has happened.
Yeah.
I actually, this is the cynical Kim that doesn't often surface, but she's very deep within. Cynical Kim thinks that they're delighted because it's getting all kinds of press for Sinclair stations, and controversy drives eyeballs, drives attention, drives a message. Right. And I think that Code Red at heart is about driving eyeballs, driving, if the message even isn't truthful, it could drive controversy, which still drives attention to their stations. And I think that that's the reality of local broadcast markets today. I think that it's a competition for diminishing eyeballs on local broadcast, and it's really unfortunate because in our sphere it intersects with our public safety concerns. You guys have done a really nice job articulating those concerns, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on all of them. The economist in me looks at this and says, this is a competitive strategy for attention and for market share.
But what's interesting too, and I'm sure John, if y'all looked at this, and I know Kim, you have, but the audience around there has shut down their social media sites, the TV station. They have graphics now they've created that we're not supporting this TV station anymore. And I mean, anytime they whatever they call it, face Twitter, something out of story, they're shutting it down. They're putting graphics in there. The viewers are, and shutting the conversation down. So it's been interesting. And you have a good point, Kim. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, this is just. I do not want to start hyping rain days as emergency days.
Exactly.
In order to bring up ratings, if it's ratings month or an important time or whatever, and the folks I work for know that, and they said, no, we don't want you to do that. So it's not a company-wide deal. I don't deal with that here, and it's something local going on up there. And I hate that it happened, but we need to get Joe on the show. But I don't think he's talking right now. We'll work on getting. We'll work on getting Joe in here. But we got to do picks of the week. We got to do picks of the week. Mine's, Radar Archives. It's an important resource. All the time, people are looking for archive radar data, and my pick, it's going to be the Iowa State Environmental Mesonet Archive, where you can pull up some composites and some single site radars. It's really easy. Sometimes that inset stuff, it can be confusing, but it's a very easy way of getting radar data from years past or hours past. So that'll be my pick of the week. So Dr. John, what's your pick of the week this week?
Oh, James, my pick of the week was actually picked before a listener by the name of John Wilkinson suggested it. So I'm agreeing with him. We've had 16 confirmed tornadoes in the state of Pennsylvania so far this year. And a listener to a local television station in the central part of the state said, I know what the reason is. And he came up with the fact that there has been an increase in traffic circles in the state of Pennsylvania. So that's why we have more tornadoes. So my pick of the week is actually an article describing this.
Yeah, and I hope they've got that audio in that article, because, and I should have pulled that audio because it's a classic. In fact, I thought, is this a joke or is this guy being serious here? I mean, is this some kind of satire? I don't know, but whatever, it's funny. Yeah. But that is great. So be sure and click on that. All right, Kim, what you got for us this week?
My pick of the week is Dr. Uccellini's ballot. Essentially, it outlines, if he was the WMO president, what his areas of focus would be, and we'll, as Shanna was saying, know the results of that election really soon. So if he does happen to become the leader of the WMO, then you'll know what he stands for. I want to comment on John's pick. I was really fascinated by that. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this. I do some research in what I call folk science. So how people understand and sort of make predictions about where tornadoes will go in their local environment. And I've documented in Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, these very kinds of beliefs are prevalent. There's one community I found that most of the beliefs are protective in nature. They are things that people think that help prevent tornadoes from hitting their town or their home in particular. There was one town in Alabama I found where something had changed in their landscape that they thought made tornadoes more likely. And it was Cordova with the carving out of Corridor X to their west. They felt that leveling of the hills had actually brought tornadoes to them. And they were hit twice on April 27th, 2011, but they also had gotten tornadoes the 2 previous years before then. Yeah. And it happened to coincide with when this corridor was built. Mm-hmm. So this isn't the first time I have heard a local traffic modification being connected by the population to tornado incidents.
Wow. That's Corridor X, Interstate 22, by the way. For those that don't know, that's the new interstate highway from Birmingham to Memphis that opened up years ago. So that's interesting. But I actually spoke at a Rotary Club, and I'm not going to say what town because I can't. But there's a gentleman who came up to me. He said ever since they built that western bypass around our city, we quit having tornadoes here. Well, great. Let's just build a bypass around every city, and we won't have any more tornadoes. I mean, this guy was being serious. I mean, it's
They're
like, are you
serious.
kidding me? I mean,
They think
it's
that's how
like
it works.
unbelievable. All right. So, Troy, what you got for us?
Well, I'm going to give a plug to Pete Pockroyd and the people, I guess, up at University of Wisconsin at Madison. It's kind of been a shakeout on these on the satellite sites with the GO 1617 coming online and how it's being presented. And I really like how the folks in the atmospheric and oceanic sciences area up at the University of Wisconsin at Madison present that on their web page, on their satellite page. And so I want to give them a little plug tonight as well. I was going to pick of the week also was going to go out to National Weather Service Fort Worth, even before we had our discussion a little while ago about how they handled the warnings yesterday in North Texas. There were no surprises, and I thought the weather office, Tom Bradshaw and his entire crew up at the Weather Service in Fort Worth, they did a very good job yesterday.
Yeah, Tom is a great guy. I'll never forget. This was years ago. Tom and I and a guy named Ron Murphy. Tom and Ron were both the Weather Service in Birmingham. We're sitting at I want to say Whataburger or something like that, and they came to us with the idea of chat, using Yahoo Chat to communicate during active weather. This was way before National Weather Service Chat. We were using Yahoo Chat, and they came to us with that idea, and I liked it. I said, by golly, that sounds fun. And we opened it up, and we started using it, and it was successful, and it was an amazing tool that led to what is now National Weather Service Chat. But Bradshaw has always been kind of on the cutting edge. He's really good. He's a great scientist, and I think he's a great leader. So it's great to see him doing such a good job at Fort Worth as the MIC. All right, so you know what? This is a record for me. Notice that it's the top of the hour.
Yeah, what's the deal?
10 o'clock Central Time, and I'm still wearing crummy clothes. I've not left early to go do the lead story on the 10 o'clock news tonight. The reason we have NBA basketball.
Yes, that's right.
So there's no pressure. So anyway, that's the deal. But listen, we're going to put the bow on this one. If you want to get in touch with us, our email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. And again, Aubrey is off on vacation, and I will be on vacation next week. And here's a logistical point. We're going to record next week's show Thursday of this week. So we're going to record a show on Thursday, June 13th, and that will be the one that will be released to the world on the 17th. We'll be back on the Monday night schedule on the 24th. But again, send us an email. Got a thought, comment, question, anything we've talked about, email@weatherbrains.com. The show notes on the website, weatherbrains.com, plus our social media information. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless. Thanks, everybody.
Great show.
We'll
Thank
see
you,
all
guys.
Well done, Kim.
Thursday.
Well
Thanks,
done.
guys.
See you later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim.